Man, it's funny how life throws things at you when you least expect it. For most of my 47 years, especially the last 20 or so behind the wheel of this rig, I thought I had life pretty much figured out. It was a long, lonely stretch of highway, one delivery after another, just me and the hum of the engine. My past buried deep like old roadkill you don't look back at. My marriage burned out years ago, drowned in too much booze and too much distance. My daughter, we barely spoke. She was practically a stranger, an ache I carried deep in my chest. So yeah, my world was small, contained within the cab of my truck. Deliveries, rest stops, the same old radio stations. That was my routine. That was me. I had built walls around myself higher than any overpass, and I truly believed that was how it was going to be until the very end of my road. Then came that night, somewhere between what felt like endless farmlands and the distant coastline. It was just another routine haul from the heartland out to the docks, the kind of drive I'd done 1,000 times. But the sky had opened up and the rain was coming down in sheets, so thick it blurred the headlights of oncoming traffic and made the world outside my windshield a watery smear. My wipers were fighting a losing battle, slapping back and forth trying to clear a path through the deluge. The wind howled, rocking the big rig just enough to make me grip the wheel tighter. And that's when I saw her, a figure hunched on the shoulder of the highway, barely visible through the spray and the gloom. She was soaking wet, hair plastered to her face, frantically waving a hand, begging for a stop. My first instinct, the one honed by decades of keeping my head down and avoiding trouble, was to just power through. There are a lot of desperate people on these roads, and getting involved rarely ends well. But something about her posture, even from a distance, screamed pure, unadulterated panic. My foot hesitated over the accelerator. My heart was thumping a little harder than usual. I swear it was like a gut punch. Something in her eyes, even through the blurring rain and the distance, just screamed pure terror, a kind of fear I recognized. It wasn't just someone looking for a ride. This was someone running for their life. And before I could even fully process what I was doing, before the old cautious me could put up a real fight, my foot was easing off the gas, and I was pulling the rig over to the shoulder. The big truck shuddered to a stop, the air brakes hissing. She scrambled in, soaked to the bone, shaking so hard I could feel the vibrations even through the seat. Her name was Sarah. She was a nurse, she gasped, her voice barely a whisper, strained and raw with panic. She'd been working at a public hospital way out in a rural town when a young man, Michael Sterling, son of a huge, influential family in the area, died on her shift after a terrible accident. She swore she did everything she could, but his family, led by his powerful father, Mr. Sterling himself, decided she was to blame. Sarah told me that even though she'd followed every protocol, done everything humanly possible, the Sterling family launched a full-blown campaign against her. It wasn't just whispers, it was outright defamation, threats, promises of vengeance that echoed with terrifying power. They were determined to destroy her. She tried to stand her ground, to explain, but it was like fighting a brick wall. The fear in her eyes wasn't just from the rain or being alone. It was the cold dread of a powerful, vengeful family hounding her every step. My mind was racing a mile a minute. Part of me, the old me, the one that always kept to himself, that had built a life on avoiding trouble and minding his own business, screamed to just drop her off at the next town. I could wish her luck, tell her to call the police, and then stick to my route. I had a schedule to keep, a delivery to make, and this was definitely not my problem. Getting involved with something this heavy, with people this powerful, was just asking for trouble, and I'd had enough trouble to last me a lifetime. But then I looked at her, really looked, and saw the raw terror in her eyes. It was a mirror of something I knew all too well, that feeling of being trapped, helpless, with nowhere to turn. Maybe it was guilt from my own past. Maybe it was a desperate, unheard plea for some kind of redemption. Or maybe it was just a simple human spark of empathy that hadn't been completely extinguished in me. Whatever it was, something inside me just snapped. I knew right then I couldn't just leave her. This wasn't just another delivery anymore. This wasn't just another anonymous mile marker on a lonely highway. The hum of the engine, which had always been my only companion, now felt different, charged with a new, unexpected purpose. The routine, predictable world of my truck cab suddenly transformed into a desperate escape vehicle. My internal compass, usually set due north towards my next drop-off, had just swiveled wildly, pointing me towards an unknown future, and all because of a terrified stranger on a rainy roadside. So there we were, a grizzled old truck driver and a terrified young nurse, heading off into an utterly unknown future. The steady, comforting hum of the engine, usually the sound of my solitude, was now filled with a tense silence, broken only by the rhythmic slosh of the wipers battling the relentless rain. Every now and then, I'd glance at her, seeing the raw fear slowly giving way to a flicker of something else in her eyes. Maybe exhaustion, maybe a tiny bit of hope, but mostly just a deep, draining weariness. We drove through the night, me keeping a paranoid eye on the rearview mirror, half expecting to see headlights gaining on us, like a scene straight out of some bad movie. Every overpass, every dimly lit gas station we passed felt like a potential trap. My hands gripped the steering wheel tight, knuckles white. The road ahead, usually so familiar and predictable, felt like a dark tunnel, and I had no idea what was waiting for us at the other end. My stomach churned with a mixture of fear and a strange, nascent sense of protectiveness. It wasn't long before my fears started to become a terrifying reality. We were on a long, deserted stretch of highway, the kind where you rarely see another car, when I spotted them. Two dark SUVs, like menacing shadows, suddenly appeared in my rearview mirror, coming up fast, their headlights blazing, almost blinding me. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drum solo. This wasn't just some angry family acting out. These guys looked professional, like they knew exactly what they were doing. I swerved the big rig, pushing her to her absolute limits, the tires fighting for grip on the still wet asphalt. It was a terrifying, desperate dance of cat and mouse, the huge truck lumbering, swaying, groaning under the strain, while they darted around us trying to box us in. Then, the piercing crack of gunfire shattered the relative peace of the night. It was sharp, loud, and chillingly real. I knew then that my trusty rig, as much as I loved her, was no longer a sanctuary. She was a giant, lumbering target. We had to get out, and we had to get out now. Gee, we scrambled out of the cab, leaving the big truck smoking and shuddering on the side of that desolate road. My heart was pounding like a jackhammer, a frantic beat against my ribs that echoed in my ears. I barely remember grabbing anything, just pulling Sarah along, yanking her by the arm, urging her to run into the dense, dark woods that lined the highway. The sounds of the pursuit, the shouts and the slamming car doors, slowly, agonizingly faded. Behind us, swallowed by the thick foliage in the distance, we pushed through thick brush and over uneven ground for what felt like hours, stumbling in the dark, our lungs burning, until we finally stumbled upon a small, dusty, unpaved road. That's when a name flashed into my mind: Tony. An old friend, another trucker, a good man who ran routes out this way. He was a straight shooter, reliable as sunrise, and someone I knew I could trust with my life, even after years of barely seeing him. It was a long shot, but it was our only shot. A quick, hushed call on my old, beat-up burner phone was all it took. Tony, without asking a single question, without a hint of surprise in his voice, just gave us a set of coordinates, a precise spot on a map way out in the middle of nowhere. He didn't waste words, he simply understood. He picked us up in his rusty old pickup truck, a vehicle that looked like it had seen more dirt roads and forgotten trails than paved highways. It was a familiar sight, that old Ford, a beacon of unexpected salvation in the pre-dawn gloom. He didn't say much, just a grunt of greeting, his eyes serious, understanding the unspoken weight of our situation. We crammed into the cab, keeping low, and he immediately veered off the main drag. We stuck to the absolute back roads, the kind where you barely see another soul for miles, winding our way relentlessly north, deeper and deeper into the sparsely populated countryside. It was a blur of anonymous small towns, dimly lit gas stations we dared not stop at, and the constant gnawing fear that they were still somehow on our tail, closing in. Every shadow, every distant headlight sent a jolt of ice through my veins. Tony finally dropped us off at an old abandoned farm, miles from anywhere, way out in the middle of nowhere. It wasn't much, just a dilapidated farmhouse with a gaping hole in the roof and a crumbling barn. Leaning precariously, but it felt like a fortress. It was cold and dusty inside, smelling of damp earth and forgotten lives. But for the first time in days, we felt a flicker of safety, a tenuous sense of being truly hidden. The silence there was so profound it almost hummed, a stark contrast to the roar of the highway and the recent chaos. While we were holed up in that dusty, forgotten place, something shifted between us, something fundamental. Sarah, seeing that I wasn't going to bail on her, started to truly open up. It wasn't just about escaping anymore, she explained, her voice gaining a newfound strength. She had proof, real, solid documents, files detailing serious screw-ups at that hospital, no proper equipment for critical procedures, doctors not getting paid on time, systemic management failures that compromised patient care. These weren't just vague accusations. These were concrete, undeniable elements that proved, without a shadow of a doubt, that Michael Sterling's tragic death wasn't her fault. It was a whole lot bigger than just her, a systemic failure rooted in neglect and corruption. She had risked everything to secretly gather these files, tucking them away, hoping for a day she might be able to use them. Looking at those documents, seeing the cold, hard facts laid out, a new kind of resolve hardened in both of us. And that's when it hit us both with crystal clarity. This wasn't just about running anymore. This wasn't just about finding a safe place to hide and hoping the storm would pass. This was about fighting back. It was about exposing the truth, about clearing her name, and maybe, just maybe, shining a light on the darkness that had consumed her life and threatened ours. The quiet determination in her eyes was infectious, and I knew with a certainty that settled deep in my bones that we were going to see this through. We spent days there, holed up in that dusty, forgotten farm, just planning. The old farmhouse smelled of damp earth and faded memories, but it felt safe, a temporary refuge from the storm outside. We talked for hours, hashing out every single detail, every possible move, every contingency. The fear was still there, a constant low hum in the background, a tightness in my chest, but it was now strangely mixed with a new kind of fierce, unwavering determination. We weren't just two scared people hiding anymore. We were a team, forging a path forward. And as we plotted, as we shared bits and pieces of our lives, the painful parts, the dreams we'd long since given up on, the tense silence between us started to fill with a different kind of quiet. It was a quiet born of understanding, of shared purpose, of a trust that was slowly, organically building between two strangers, thrown together by desperation. It was strange how such a terrifying, desperate situation could forge such a deep and unexpected connection, making me feel something I hadn't felt in years: hope. Madrakti, Kiash. Eventually, we decided that a bigger city, further north, let's call it Riverbend City, was our best bet. It was large enough, busy enough, for two people to disappear into the anonymous flow of everyday life. We found a small, rundown apartment in a quiet part of town, paid cash for a few months up front, and started the painstaking process of building a new life, brick by painful brick, always looking over our shoulders. New names, new stories. Carefully constructed backstories that wouldn't raise too many questions. I became John, a retired mechanic, and she was Emily, a distant cousin starting fresh after some unspecified troubles back home. It felt weird, like living in a movie, playing roles in a script we hadn't written, but it was also, strangely, incredibly freeing. It felt like we were shedding the old skins that had brought us so much pain, leaving behind the weight of our pasts. Our days in Riverbend City were filled with careful, quiet work. We meticulously put together her case, gathering everything, double-checking every single fact, and making endless copies of all the damning evidence. Every piece of paper felt like a tiny victory, a step closer to the truth seeing the light of day. We spent hours researching, trying to figure out the best, safest way to get the evidence to the right people, the public prosecutor's office, key media contacts, without putting ourselves in even more danger. It was slow, frustrating work, every single step a risk, every anonymous phone call a gamble. We planned how to approach the local prosecutor's office and even how to leak some of the more damning details to a couple of journalists we had identified as trustworthy, people who seemed genuinely interested in exposing corruption. It felt like a high-stakes chess game played out in whispered conversations and coded messages, and we both knew we were playing for our very lives with everything on the line. The moment we finally sent those anonymous packages, dropping them carefully into different mailboxes across town, felt like holding our breath indefinitely. There was an intense, terrifying mix of vulnerability and immense, almost dizzying relief. We had done it. The truth was out there finally on its way, moving through the postal system, destined for the right hands. All we could do now was wait, and the waiting was pure agony, a slow burn of anxiety that never quite left us. The next few days were excruciating. Every unexpected knock on our apartment door, every unfamiliar car driving slowly down our street sent a jolt of pure panic through me, making my heart leap into my throat. We spent hours just watching the news, scanning online headlines, hoping for any small sign, any whisper that our desperate gamble had paid off. That quiet apartment, which had become our sanctuary, now felt less like a home and more like a high-stakes waiting room filled with unspoken anxieties and a desperate, fragile hope. But then, one morning, it happened. A small, almost easily missed blurb flashed on a local news channel. Then, a few hours later, a much bigger story started popping up in the online papers. An official investigation had been launched into the hospital Sarah had worked at. Allegations of gross mismanagement, systematic neglect, all the damning things Sarah had documented, they were finally seeing the light of day. The news spread like wildfire through the regional media, picking up steam with every passing hour. We watched, absolutely glued to the screen, a strange mix of disbelief and overwhelming triumph washing over us. It wasn't a full exoneration yet, not by a long shot, but it was a start. A massive, undeniable crack in the seemingly impenetrable wall of silence and power. The influential Sterling family, who had seemed utterly untouchable just weeks before, were suddenly on the defensive, their carefully constructed reputation starting to crumble under the weight of the undeniable truth. The tide had truly begun to turn. The sense of immense relief that flooded our small apartment was almost overwhelming, a powerful wave that washed over us after months of holding our breath. It felt like a dam breaking, finally releasing all the pent-up tension and fear we'd been carrying. We hugged a tight, desperate embrace that spoke volumes without a single word. It wasn't completely over, not by a long shot, but we had struck the first, crucial blow. And for the first time in what felt like an eternity, we could breathe a little easier, a genuine deep breath that didn't feel like a luxury. The constant pressure in my chest, that tight, nagging knot in my stomach that had become my unwelcome companion for so long, they both started to loosen, to dissipate. We had made it. through the very worst of it, that terrifying, desperate escape, and we had done it together. That shared experience, that harrowing journey, had forged an unbreakable bond between us, a connection deeper than anything I'd ever known. It was more than just gratitude, it was a profound sense of shared victory, a quiet understanding that we were truly in this together, come what may. The fight for Sarah's name wasn't quick, and it certainly wasn't easy. It too dragged on for what felt like an eternity, through relentless legal battles and intense media scrutiny. There were days when it felt like we were taking one step forward and two steps back, the pressure relentless. But slowly, painstakingly, the tide truly turned. The mountain of evidence she had meticulously collected, the undeniable facts, spoke for themselves. Public opinion began to shift, slowly at first, then with increasing momentum, making it impossible for the truth to be ignored. Bit by bit, the flimsy accusations against her crumbled under the weight of undeniable proof. The powerful Sterling family, for all their influence and resources, simply couldn't fight the cold, hard truth forever. It took immense time, incredible patience, and a wellspring of raw courage on Sarah's part. She had to testify, to face down those who had tried to destroy her, enduring their stares and their veiled threats with a quiet strength that awed me. I was there, every single step of the way, a quiet, unwavering presence in the back of the courtroom, always ready with a steady hand to hold when she needed it most, a silent anchor in the storm. Looking back, it's truly hard to believe how much changed. I went from being a guy who lived his life a quarter mile at a time, completely closed off from everyone and everything, a solitary figure in a big rig, to someone who finally understood what it meant to truly connect with another human being. Sarah eventually got her nursing license back, completely cleared her name, and slowly, carefully, started rebuilding her life. She even found work at a small community clinic, far from the harsh spotlight and the shadows of her past, where she could heal and help others. And me? I still drive sometimes. The road is still a part of me, a deep-seated habit, but it's different now. It doesn't feel as lonely, doesn't feel like an escape anymore. The vast, open highway feels less like a destination I'm running toward, and more like a path that against all odds led me to find a piece of myself I didn't even know was missing, and showed me that even after decades of driving away from everything, sometimes the greatest journey is the one that brings you closer to someone else. It's a feeling that stays with me, even now, a quiet, profound hum that echoes the steady beat of a life unexpectedly, beautifully changed.